Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. I am your host, Captain B-Nard, and topic of discussion today is going to be the BHDL2, a complete review and reflection of the Battle Hub Draft League Season 2. We're going to do this pretty much the same way as we always do, where I'm going to go over pretty much everything that happened this season, give you guys a bunch of facts and figures about everything that went down this season of Draft League, and then give you guys my in-depth thoughts about why that all happened the way that it did. Um, we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. For those of you who've been watching the content here on the channel the past couple of months, you'll already know this, but the Philadelphia Pidgeys did not do very well at all this season of Draft League, unfortunately. As you can see, our hopes and dreams of winning the first ever Pokemon Viola have been broken, much like the Viola itself. As you can tell by the beautiful low quality thumbnail there, we did end this season technically with a 2-6 record, which is, I believe, the worst we've ever done in Draft League. I know we finished in 15th place, which is also the worst we've ever done in Draft League. Really, really abysmal season for us here. And we're going to talk a lot about why I think that happened. Um, but yeah, having said all of that, we're going to go ahead and just start rolling right into the facts and figures here. The first thing I want to go over with you guys, as per the usual, is the team. Here we have our original version of the team that we drafted, which we held for weeks 1 through 4 of the league. Um, as you can see, and we already did, state this previously, but the team consisted of Palafin, Gudra, Orthworm, Kilowattrel, Ogerpon Hearthflame form, Hariyama, Poltegeist, Wigglytuff, Glimora, Farigiraf, and Mudsdale. And of course, you will note that our Terra captains here were the Kilowattrel, Poltegeist, and Wigglytuff. So this was the original version of the team that I drafted. Had it in weeks 1 through 4, as I mentioned, of the season, and we ended up going 2-2 with this version of the team. There were some ups and some downs to that. Um, you know, I don't know, really want to get into too many specifics because we kind of already covered that at length in the weekly recap and preview videos. Yeah, that's just kind of how that rendition of the team went down. I was pretty happy initially with the team that I drafted, although we did make an adjustment, and then toward the end of the season, I kind of had some revelations about the team that I kind of wish I had had sooner. But yeah, that was pretty much the first rendition of the team. Um, After week 4, we went ahead and, like I said, we were 2-2 at this point. So I wanted to try and make some changes to see if we could, get back into our winning ways. And so we ended up making a couple of changes to the team, and those were that we ended up transacting away our Orthworm and our Farigiraf and ended up grabbing Grimmsnarl to replace them. As you can see, this is the rendition of the team we had in weeks 5 through 8 of the league. And obviously, we went 0-4 during that time period, again, technically, since we did forfeit our week 8 game. But still, technicalities included, that is a loss for as far as in the league's eyes anyway, as far as the league is concerned, that is a loss, obviously. Yeah, our transactions definitely did not pay off. But yeah, nothing else really changed in the team throughout the entire season. Obviously, our Terra captains remain the same. And yeah, we were not able to score a single victory with this rendition of the team. Obviously, obviously, as I said, the change did not help. Um, but anyway, we're just going to go ahead and keep on rolling here, and that is going to go ahead and bring us to um, overall stats for our Pokemon this season here in the BHDL2. So, as you can see, we have the whole team as we ended, and then we have I tacked on the Pokemon that we transacted away during the season at the bottom there. But essentially, I think we did have a couple of Pokemon that had positive KDRs, although obviously the majority of our Pokemon had negative KDRs since we did so poorly. But there you can see we ended up bringing the Kilowattrel and the Ogerpon Hearthflame form to every single game that we had this season. As I mentioned, we did play 7 games. We didn't play the Week 8 game. So the max number of appearances you can see will be 7, obviously, right here. So yeah, the Kilowattrel and the Ogerpon Hearthflame came to every single game. So those really ended up being pillars of the team. And then not far behind that, we have Palafin clocking in with 6 out of 7 game appearances, and Goodra with 5 out of 7 game appearances. So those two came to just about every game this season. Again, so kind of, I guess you would say, kind of cornerstones of the team as it turned out to be. And then, of course, we have a bunch of appearances, about 2 or 3 appearances from most of our other Pokemon there. So we ended up bringing the Grimmsnarl, Poltegeist, Glamora, and Mudsdale to 3 games this season. Then we ended up bringing the Hariyama and the Wigglytuff to 2 games, and we ended up bringing the Orthworm to just 1 game, and the Farigiraf to not a single game this season. So, one little thing that I was kind of happy about here is that I was happy that I was able to bring a good spread of Pokemon for the most part. Aside from the Farigiraf, at least all the Pokemon we held at some point in the season here got to come to at least 1 game, which was nice. Many of them 3+ games, so that's good because I always strive when I do my draft league teams for creating teams that are unpredictable in terms of any Pokemon can show up on any given week, and that was kind of one of the reasons that I thought I had a pretty good draft initially, was because I feel like I did a good job of making sure that every Pokemon on the team was a viable bring pretty much every week. And I do still feel that way even despite our rough season. I do still feel that way postseason, but I do have some other, obviously, thoughts and analysis about the team, which we're going to get into momentarily here. But having said that, we're going to keep on moving. And we're going to get into our player awards once again here. So that is going to be 2 positive, 2 negative. We did this last season, so this is pretty much similar in the same vein. So the team MVP, even though this seems like these seem like a little bit of hollowed awards to give to our Pokemon, seeing as how poorly we did this season. But the MVP of the team this season, I'd say, would have to be Palafin. It was the only Pokemon that had a respectable KDR this season. It was pretty much our win con in the 2 games that we did end up winning. It performed very well, I think. It did pretty much, for the most part, what I had hoped it would do, which is late game cleaner, that sort of thing. Obviously, Palafin is just a powerhouse in every sense of the word. Once you get it transformed into hero form, it is just really a force to be reckoned with, and so it definitely pulled the weight for what it was worth on the team this season. So definitely have to would say, or I would say that the MVP would definitely have to be Palafin. So, but additionally, I will say there is a Pokemon that I drafted that exceeded expectations, and that award is going to have to go to Mudsdale. So, Mudsdale, as you know, was the Pokemon that I drafted last this season in the league. It was kind of just like because I could pick up at the end of the season, or I should say at the end of the draft, I had some extra points available, and I was like, I don't have a ground type on the team, and I like Mudsdale, so I might as well just pick it up. So it was a why not pickup essentially. I wasn't really expecting to bring it to too many games. I wasn't really expecting a lot from it, but Mudsdale definitely exceeded my expectations. It did come in clutch, actually, both of the games we ended up winning early on in the season. So definitely, I would have to, give that exceeded expectations award to Mudsdale. So, but the flip side of that coin, of course, is going to be our negative Pokemon Player Awards, and the first one for disappointing performance. Is unfortunately going to have to go to Ogre Pond. So I have to say that I was actually, when I drafted Ogre Pond, I was expecting quite a lot more from it than what I got. I was actually extremely disappointed with the way Ogre Pond played on my team throughout the season. As I mentioned, I brought it to every single game, and not once was I really able to get any sort of like sweep or any sort of like huge momentum going off of Ogre Pond. I think there's a couple reasons for that. Obviously, with it not being able to hold an item, that definitely does handicap it. Um, but also, I think what you're going to do with Ogre Pawn is pretty predictable. Additionally, it is kneecapped by the inability to Terra. So, but even despite those things, I really was expecting much more from Ogre Pawn than what I got. So I was very disappointed with how Ogre Pawn played out this season. And finally, of course, we have the LVP award, and of course, that is going to have to go to Farigiraf. Just due to the fact that obviously I only had Frigoraph for the first half of the season before I transacted it away. It didn't come to a single game. Even it had I kept it on board the rest of the season, which I couldn't just because I needed to free up the extra points to make the trade I wanted to make. But even if it had stayed on the team, it may have not come to a single game anyway. So it was just one of those things that, like, again, Frigoraph was more of like a why not pickup at the end of the draft, kind of like Mudsdale was. Um, and I just ended up not being able to find any sort of niche for it in any game to bring for the half of the season that I did have it on the team. But that pretty much wraps up all of that for you guys. So that is going to go ahead and bring us to the elephant in the room here, and that is going to be what happened to the Philadelphia Pidgeys this season in the BHDL2. So, obviously, as I mentioned before, we ended up finishing 15th place out of 16 participants, which is obviously awful. You can't get much worse than that. Um, Obviously, 2-6 record speaks for itself. Technically, could we have played our week 8 game and maybe tried to get a win and get a little bit of a better, showing for ourselves? Technically, yes, we could have done that. But at the same time, I just didn't feel like that was, worth it. So obviously, as I had mentioned a couple times now, we ended up not doing that. But even granted, one of those losses being the forfeit loss, this was still, I believe, the worst performance that I've ever had, the Philadelphia Pidgeys have ever had here in any draft league, as this is the end of our 7th draft league here on YouTube. So, um, like I said, the big elephant in the room has been for me for the last several weeks here what happened this season. So, I thought quite long and hard about this, to be honest with you guys, and I came to the conclusion that actually there were a lot of factors at play leading to the Pidgeys crashing and burning this season. And so I listed them off here, and I'm going to go over them in order of how big of a factor I think they played in our downfall this season. So, the first one is going to be poor coach performance. And when I say that, I mean obviously my performance. So, I think that I really did a bad job this season as a coach. I think for a lot of games, I played poorly. I think I made bad judgment calls, bad reads. I either under prepped or brought the wrong sets that I shouldn't have brought to games. A couple times this season as well. And overall, ultimately, when a team doesn't do good, I think Um, in Pokemon Draft League, the onus is going to ultimately fall on the coach more times than not, and obviously in this case, I think that is the case. I think I and my lackluster performance as the coach, obviously of the Pidgeys this season, was the chief reason that we did so badly. Like I said, I think I have mentioned this quite a few times throughout the season, but it just felt like in some games, just every judgment call I made ended up being the wrong one. And I don't know if that was just me playing badly or my opponent out reading me, out anticipating me, that kind of thing, a combination of both. Um, but that is what it is, and that's on me at the end of the day. I think that was definitely the biggest reason that we didn't do well this season. Um, but I think that there are a bunch of other reasons too. So the next reason I have, I'm going to say, is going to be the subpar team composition. So what I mean by that is I think that when you look at my team, when I look at my team that I drafted this season, at first glance, it actually looks like a really good, really strong, really solid team. Um, with stuff like the Palafin, the Ogre Pawn, the Poltegeist as a Terra Captain, especially the Glamora, things like that. It does look like a very strong team, but I think when you do a deep dive and think about it a little farther, as I have in the waning weeks of the season and since the season ended, I kind of came to the realization that I don't think this team is actually as good as people, myself included, had thought it was initially. So, um, what I mean by that is I think all of my biggest threats, all of my biggest powerhouses on this team are severely handicapped in one way or another. So, take Palafin, for example, my number one draft pick. The problem, obviously, with the Palafin is you need to have it in and switch it out, obviously, to get it into hero mode for it to actually start putting in work. So that's a big problem because it forces me to pretty much lead with Palafin almost every single time, which makes my lead incredibly predictable in the game. It also forces me to potentially have to hard switch the Palafin out if either my opponent has some sort of water immunity on their team, which most of them did, or in a case where I'm fearing that Palafin could get outsped and take a lot of damage or get knocked out. Um, so it really kind of like gets the game off to a not very good start, having to lead with Palafin all the time. And then if I choose not to lead with Palafin, then I'm kind of handicapped with a Pokemon that sucks essentially until I can get it in and then get it back out to get it into hero form. So the inconvenience of Palafin, of having to either lead with it or be handicapped by it not being in hero form, is a huge detriment, and that I had not fully anticipated or considered when I drafted it. Um, and that definitely played a big factor, I think, in a lot of these games, because giving your opponent basically a free turn, um, almost guaranteed, or having a Pokemon that has pretty abysmal stats on your team is a huge detriment. So yeah, that was a problem. Again, as far as the Ogerpon Hearthflame goes, we kind of already talked about that. But that was a similar situation where it pretty much only does one thing, and it does that thing very well, but it's a lot harder to make it work when you see it coming a mile away. Not being able to hold an item was a problem. Um, the weakness to rock obviously is a huge problem with stealth rocks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, not being able to Terra as well, I could say with Palafin, that is certainly a disadvantage. Not being able to Terra. Um, so but also my other threats, like the Poltegeist, for example, kind of a very similar situation. Poltegeist can be a huge powerhouse, can be a huge menace, but unfortunately, it can only do one thing pretty much, right? It shell smashes. That's about it. That's the premier thing that it does, and you can't do a lot else with it. So um, that's a problem. Obviously, because when people see it coming a mile away, they can prepare for it, so that it doesn't go off. And that's again, Poltegeist kind of popped off a couple of times this season, but didn't really run roughshod or run rampant much this season, um, just due to that fact. Um, and then also with stuff like the Glamora, again, kind of predictable what it can do. I mean, it does what it does very well, but it is rather predictable in what it does. So I think one of the biggest problems that I had this season was while I drafted a pretty deep roster, and yes, any Pokemon could come on any given week. The biggest powerhouses that I drafted on this team were either handicapped or very predictable, or both. So I think that definitely played a huge factor in why we didn't do well this season. Um, Additionally, after we transacted the Earthworm away mid-season, I think that our weaknesses and resistances ratio got kind of thrown out of whack, and I kind of realized this like a week or two after I had transacted Earthworm away. I realized that without a Steel type on my team, we had a lot of ice and fairy weaknesses that were unchecked essentially, and so that played a huge factor in not being able to prep the best teams defensively for my opponents, which led to some pretty ugly sweeps against us in a few of the last weeks that we played. Um, yeah, those all the stuff I'm going to put under team composition. Obviously, those are things that I should have known. I should have factored in when building this team. And like I said, I think I was so focused on building a roster that any given week any Pokemon could come, that I didn't consider that a lot of these Pokemon that I drafted were either kind of one dimensional or kind of handicapped by what they could do. Yeah, I think that again, I think that played a big factor this season. Additionally, the rest of this stuff is most of this stuff is just stuff that I have already kind of mentioned in my weekly recaps and preview videos. So I think we did have a lot of bad matchups on paper this season, and I think that kind of feeds into the subpar team composition. So when you have an imbalanced team built, or you have a situation where your Pokemon are one dimensional, you're going to have bad matchups on paper. And I think, we really felt that, especially in the latter half of the season. Um, but yeah, that was really unfortunate for us being in those situations. I remember feeling like that several weeks, um, prepping several weeks like that, and just thinking, well, I don't have an answer for this. I don't have an answer for that. Or like if they set up with this Pokemon or that Pokemon, they're just gonna like run through my team, and there's nothing I can do about it. And honestly, that's not something that I've ever really felt in draft league before with any other team that I drafted. I never really felt like there were just so many Pokemon on the opposing teams that could just run through me, and there wasn't much I could do about it. So yeah, that was a big problem. Obviously, next, there were some hacks against us this season. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. But obviously, I'm not going to put too much emphasis on that. But at the end of the day, yes, there were a couple of games I think that I lost that were hacks induced, where we either had got hit with like a really really ill-timed crit or something like that just kind of screwed us over. Um, so yeah, that was a problem. Like I said, I'm not going to put too much of the blame for our bad season on that. But that was certainly a factor in several of these games as well. Then the last thing I want to just point out here is going to be that I think the cutthroat nature of this season of the draft league was definitely a little bit of an issue. Kind of took us by surprise a little bit, and ended up hurting us. So what I mean by that is, I think there was a stark difference in attitude in the BHDL for season two than there was for season one. And what I mean by that is, I think after season one, a lot of the players, whether they did good or especially if they didn't do good, definitely got a lot more serious, a lot more cutthroat. They drafted better, I think, the second season, but also um, there was a lot of, and this is something that I only came to realize toward the end of the season. There was a lot of like coaches getting assistance from other coaches, and like um, doing what they call mock battles, which is essentially like you play somebody and that person constructs like whatever team they think your opponent is going to construct to just kind of help you like prepare for it. So there was a lot of help being had between people this season. I would like to state for the record that I did not participate in any of that. One, because I kind of didn't know that was a thing, but also two, because I'm really stubborn. And so even if I did kind of realize that that was going on, I probably wouldn't have done it myself anyway. Because I guess I'm a very old school mindset, and I've always been of the mindset of like when it comes to a competition status or a competition situation, rather, you're either going to rise or fall based on your own merits and not based on like what someone else tells you to do. Um, and I think there was definitely quite a bit of that going on behind the scenes this season too. So yeah, this season became a lot more competitive, a lot more cutthroat, a lot more serious. Not that the first season wasn't competitive, but I kind of didn't realize how competitive everything got this season, especially behind the scenes. And yeah, I think that definitely kind of blindsided us a little bit this season. So, but it just kind of is what it is. None of that is really technically against the rules or technically illegal or anything like that. But just a lot of hardcore fanatics out there this season trying to win. And yeah, when you combine all of those factors, previously stated, that was just kind of the icing on the top of the cake of failure for the Philadelphia Pidgeys this season. So, um, but yeah, that's kind of my analysis of what happened this season. I think, like I said, all those factors combined to really just turn into, again, as I said, the worst season of Draft League the Pidgeys have had. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about that. So, having said that, we'll go ahead and finish it up with some closing remarks. So, overall, I'm still going to say that I did have fun this season um, of the league. Obviously, far less fun than I had last season of the league because of the abysmal performance. But it was still an interesting season. It was still a learning experience. Like I said, overall, even though I did have some fun, I am extremely disappointed with my performance this season, how the team turned out, how our record turned out at the end of the season, and yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about that. Um, yeah, I think everything I have to say has been said at this point regarding the season. So it is a disappointment, but the only thing I can say at this point is that just kind of move toward the future of Pokemon here and try to do better next season. I think we are going to try to come back next season. And come back stronger, come back more well informed and more savvy ourselves, and try to get some redemption perhaps next season in this draft league, depending on when that may be. But in the meantime, I am definitely looking forward to getting back into more casually competitive games. As you guys know, I've been doing that a little bit already, and as you guys will also know, the Pokemon DLC, Scarlet and Violet DLC Part 2, is upon us at this point, so I am going to be playing through that, obviously. And once that is complete, I'm going to be turning out more new original singles teams for you guys and just kind of doing my thing going from there. I would like to say, though, that this is not the last that you've seen of the Philadelphia Pidgeys for sure. We may be on the shelf for now, but I think we are going to come back at some point in the future and try to get our redemption here for this season. And yeah, um, gonna looking to put this season in the rear view for sure, but still keep it in mind moving forward. So. I would also like to say thank you to all the coaches who participated here, and congratulations to those who did well this season of the Draft League. And yeah, I think it was definitely ultra competitive, definitely learned a lot. despite the disappointment. And yeah, looking forward to the future of Pokemon. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this one, guys. So thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. So that's it, and we'll see you next time.